John Kennedy was right about one thing when he said the Dallas Morning News is one of the most irresponsible newspapers in the country.
That was an unbelievable mess, I think, for online media. I can't say whether the Dallas Morning News made a bad judgment call or not, but if I felt strongly that I had a good story like that, I think I would have done what they did. But, you know, jumping the gun always, I think, hurts the reputation of the media.
I personally found it reprehensible as a lawyer that newspapers and magazines published the alleged confession by Timothy McVeigh on the eve of his trial. And the answer from the media was, it's a story. The public has the right to know. The hell the public has the right to know. The public doesn't have the right to lynch somebody.
The story, I think, has stood the test of time. It was a good story. It was a very dramatic story. And it became even more dramatic because of the timing of it.
Jones has filed papers basically arguing that because of the spate of media stories about an alleged purported confession that McVeigh was supposed to have made, that has somehow polluted and contaminated the potential jury pool. As a result of that,
although the defense tried to take advantage of the controversy, the trial schedule was kept intact. 3 days before the McVeigh trial began, hundreds of journalists waited for their credentials, and final preparations were underway.
Note that on these spaces right here, Tribune, CNN News Source, all engineered by TCI, okay? All bypassing our television station, all right? Using digital compression up on TCI's Bird.
Extensive planning was necessary because of the logistics associated with getting information out of the courthouse and into publication or on air in hundreds of media outlets.
The real descending of the hordes of media really begins on Sunday. If you think there's a line out there today, wait till you see everybody line up for media credentials on Monday.
Despite expected crowds, the rules were the same for everyone. Any type of camera on the courthouse block would be confined to the bullpen. Reporters without cameras could attend the trial if space was available, and overflow crowds could hear proceedings from a separate listening room. The stage was set for trial.
invariably, when you have events like this, people use the phrase "media circus." How do you feel about that phrase, or how it applies to here?
This is not a media circus. This is the Denver Theater.
We're just putting up some glare screens so people don't jump over it. Nobody should be walking back here at all.
And what we're doing is we're welding this grate right here to keep people from dropping items into the sewer line here, anywhere in and around and near the federal building here.
خاصة أن هناك الكثير من الميليشيات اليمينية المتطرفة التي تتعاطف مع تيموثي ماكفي.
Defendant Timothy McVeigh followed closely. Tony Winton at the federal courthouse in Denver.
Opening day brought journalists from all over the world and the expected tight security. It was the beginning of jury selection, one of several trial high points when the so-called phenomenon of parachute journalism would dramatically increase the media population, with hundreds of journalists dropping in for just a few days' coverage. These were the times when makeshift newsrooms like this one, shared by MSNBC, NBC, and Court Television, were the busiest, when the pressure to compete was the most intense. Charles Ely, as well as many others from Oklahoma and national media, were among those who would parachute in for regular, sometimes extended intervals. Photographer Bill Hauser was among a smaller crowd who stayed for the duration.
You know, I've volunteered to move up here because two reasons. One, is a chance to be a part of history and make a lot of money. And the other thing is because when the bombing happened, by the time we got there was nothing but body count and just devastation. And it took a lot to get past that personally. I mean, I kind of had a hard time sleeping when I got home at night and stuff like that. So this is a chance for me to get some closure, if you could call it that.
Overtime pay and emotional closure would come into play for many of the television, radio, and newspaper journalists who'd lived and told the story since April 1995. Because of the cameras and the bullpen risers, TV crews would be the most visible in Denver. but restrictions would diminish some of television's power to deliver the story.
This case has been a little bit different from the standpoint that since the judge did not allow cameras in the courtroom, it has been very much almost a print story.
Not everyone would agree that the print media were taking the lead, but most would acknowledge that the Denver media had adopted the story as their own, and like the Oklahoma contingent, were making the story top priority.
With it happening right here in our own backyard, a paper of our reputation, we've got to have a presence. We've got to try to be at least a paper of record. We've got to cover it from front to back. We've got to pull out all the stops.
Regardless of the commitment, the length of stay, or the medium, restraint was expected. Reporters were asked to sit at chairs in the bullpen while interview subjects spoke from a podium. The consortium would provide common video and audio feeds. But there were glitches, such as when the pool camera operator was in the restroom at the wrong time. The result was the type of swarming that gives the impression the media are out of control, but in fact usually happens when reporters and photographers worry they'll miss something.
We create a mob scene, fear of the lack of the soundbite, or having, I mean, there's nothing worse than getting that phone call from your news director, your boss, or anybody else going, do you know what I just saw in the competition? So you react as a mob scene. You came for that one little thing they think the boss back home wants, or one little thing that can add to a story. So people see those images and they think we act as a mob, and guess what? We do, because there's 200 people up here sitting working on their tans, waiting for something to happen, and when it does, all the adrenaline starts pumping and you go, okay, I need this one too.
You get the pack mentality because that's the only opportunity that you have. A non-visual story like the OKC story, very few photo opportunities, since a lot of the guts of the whole story has to be done by sketching. So you're in a real bind to get those pictures. No one likes these kinds of restrictions, but that sort of pack mentality is almost always resulting from a restricted situation.
The consortium's outdoor news conference podium wasn't always successful, but as this time-lapse shows, that often meant that interviewees would simply have to be patient as reporters and photographers cycled in and out until everyone was satisfied. And there was another unexpected problem for reporters. Judge Richard Maitch ordered attorneys not to talk about the case, so they stayed out of the bullpen altogether. Many crews then moved across the street, waiting for attorneys to come and go. Although prosecutors still refused to comment, Jones usually found a way to say something that didn't violate the judge's gag rule, even though many times it was simply to say that he couldn't say anything.
Well, I can't really answer that. I can't comment on that. I'm sorry, I really can't under the judge's order. Well, I can't address that because of the judge's order. I don't think I can comment on that either.
Though Jones talked without saying much, his journeys to and from the courthouse became moving news conferences, with the resulting swarms turning into a sort of living organism.
The amoeba? Well, actually, if you watch this whole thing evolve, it's as if Jones walks up, he is then, and everybody else is on the other corner, so you have Jones walking up, he's then enveloped by cameramen and sound people, and they sort of go around him, and if you watch it, they sort of spin and they move, and it works its way up the street. Then at the end, it just sort of spits them out.
And we're out here to cover the story, and without pictures, you don't really have much of a story. It's very competitive, you know. You have anywhere from 10 to 20 cameras, all trying to take a picture of the same thing, and it's a moving target.
Main thing is don't fall down, try not to hurt anybody else. Let's see, maybe get their head in the frame once in a while.
And then whine that you didn't get the shot you wanted.
Yeah, and hopefully your audio man isn't playing Star Wars with the rest of the audio man. You can hear some audio.
Experienced crews know the so-called amoeba has its dangers. Getting caught in the middle is one of them.
That is a question that the jury must decide.
Another problem occurs when microphone cords are used instead of wireless microphones and boom poles.
Watch your cord!
It basically lassoed everybody.
Although the amoeba moves